Okay, so, total honesty here, this is my 5th and a half attempt to write this newsletter. For various reasons, ranging from a lack of focus to outright dissatisfaction with my writing, it's been a long week of writing, rewriting, questioning what I'm doing, then writing some more. I also spent a lot of time this week on the couch doing crafts and getting back into physical drawing mediums in an attempt to avoid my problems until tomorrow. Well, it's tomorrow again, and after a few rounds of reflecting on what I'd written, I found that my biggest issue was that for as much as I wanted to coherently explain to you all how I went from planning to writing to storyboarding the first part of Chapter 1, that turned out to be an impossible task. Namely because the first part of Chapter 1 contains a mishmash of new and old ideas from the original layered atop about a half-dozen rewrites. Structured is not a word I can use to describe my writing process with this chapter. Even haphazard or inconsistent feel too kind. Making this chapter was a mess, and I cannot in any meaningful way describe that mess to you all without outright lying about the process or misconstruing it horribly. Maybe once I'm not working on a chapter that has been endlessly revised and rewritten, I'll take another crack at going through my workflow. Might be a few chapters till I feel like I have a good groove going, but I'll get there. Instead, I thought now might be a good moment to look back on my original chapter and compare it to what I'm working on. Namely, I'll look at pages with story beats that I kept from the original, which, upon reviewing my work, equates to a whole 3 pages. It's not much, but there is a lot to unpack in comparing them, so that's what I'm gonna do. Enjoy the ride! I've learned a lot about comics, panels, and storytelling in the 10 weeks since I started making this newsletter. It's truly invigorated my creative spirit and has allowed me to produce work that is already significantly better than what I was doing before. It makes returning to comic pages I made over a year ago even more interesting to look at. While I undoubtedly learned a lot over the last 10 weeks, I also learned a lot from a year of making comics. And surprisingly, there's a lot I unlearned. I mentioned this previously, but as I progressed through making comics over the year, I made the conscious decision to reduce the size and complexity of my panels. I did this so that my work wouldn't get muddied and squished too badly in the scrolling webcomic format. This was something hindsight would call a bad decision. There is so much creativity in my original chapter, particularly as it relates to the panels. Just take a look at the final 4 pages of the original in their originally intended comic page form. Honestly, they're not bad. I put a lot of love and care into these pages, and I remember being disappointed when I converted them into the scrolling format and found that certain parts had to be minimized to near unseeable scale, or the impact of those larger panels was significantly reduced. Nowadays, I know how to correct those problems. Proper page sizes and more intentional composition choices will make it so that even the transfer from comic page to scrolling comic shouldn't affect my work too badly. These things have been taken into consideration for the remake. I'm looking at these 4 pages from the original in particular because they're the ones with story beats I kept in the remake. Everything leading up to these pages, from the lore dump to Renan and Nolan's introductions, have been changed completely. And with good reason, I think, as I look at the original's opening 5 pages of lore dumping over less than stellar exposition and establishing shots. Look, I'm a sucker for a good establishing shot. I love seeing them. I'm terrible at making them. It's crossed my mind many times to tackle these pages again, but I don't know if I have the time or patience for such a tedious side project. At least, not right now. Plus, I still have a lot of work to do until I actually feel half decent at drawing buildings and landscapes. Anyway, back to the final 4 pages. I have these laid out in the format they would appear as pages in a book, meaning I'd done the wise thing of making sure that a big reveal occurs after a page flip. Those big reveals being Levi the golden floating fire-breathing baby and Renan's magical waterfall. 2 big, dramatic shots. Between them is a page that slows the moment down with some narration as everyone reacts to the situation in their own ways. I did this to set up the story and let that page flip reveal happen, and it's not bad. But I'll be honest, I think what I have in store is even better. Excuse the fact that my work is still in thumbnail form, it's going to be a while till I feel ready to actually make these pages. These are pages 8 and 9 of the remake, meaning page 8 is the page flip reveal and page 9 is right beside it. The biggest change you'll notice is that there's no longer a page between Levi's reveal and Renan's waterfall. Instead, the most important beats of that original page, plus some new beats, are thrown into the bottom of page 8 and the top of page 9. But the fiery reveal and the waterfall are still full page images. I intend to have flames reaching all the way to the bottom of page 8 and for the waterfall to reach all the way to the top of page 9. The extra panels sit on top of these images, giving you the sense of these events happening within each other. For the fiery reveal panel, I've changed a lot of the composition. I still want Levi front and center, a peek at the midwives panicking and the queen KO'd in bed. Renan has been removed from the shot to get closer to Levi and whip the flames into the foreground. Levi will be in a flame vortex in this shot instead of the measly upward flamethrower he was conjuring before. I'm going to add wind and dynamics to this that will make it way more exciting than the original. In contrast, Renan's waterfall shot remains the same. I like the visual of his back to the audience while a waterfall cascades over Levi then, and I still like it now. The only difference will be that the focus of the shot will move down to allow for panels to be above them rather than below. When both pages are finished and viewable side by side, they'll create this really neat visual of fire and water dominating opposing pages. I think it's gonna look awesome. Then, readers will flip the page to the scene calming down. In hindsight, my original choices meant that the waterfall stole the page flip reveal, leaving Levi floating down to Renan to be clearly visible on the adjoining page. But between the two, Levi floating down to Renan is the more important one. This is the true moment the two first meet. And though Renan doesn't fully realize it yet, this baby is about to change his life forever. That deserves a moment of emphasis. In my original, I gave them this emphasis by giving them 2/3 of a page for the shot. This is definitely still a valid option. It really gives that sense like Renan and Levi are the only two in the room. They're the only two that truly matter in this moment as mentor meets student for the first time. But as I sat and considered my options and my new page distribution, I started playing around with compositions until this new idea hit me. Page 10 of the remake is basically if you took elements from the final 3 pages of the original and rolled them into one. You get a moment of calm as 2 panels quietly display the aftermath of the fire-water combo the room just endured. Then, center page, with the framing of the panels creating a literal spotlight on the moment, Levi floats down toward Renan. Rather than flashing to everyone panicking like in the original, we get a look at everyone else watching the moment in awe. Well, except the queen, but she's had a rough day. She gets a pass. I like this composition way better. The first one is nice, but I just love how the panels force your eye down the page and back to the center with everyone's gazes focused on Levi. Again, it's another page that's going to look awesome when it's finished. The final page of the remake shows Levi in Renan's arms and gives the moment a few more panels to wind down compared to the abrupt ending of the original. That's because in the original, I was more focused on punctuating the end with narration of the literal title of the series because, I wanted to hit you over the head with the meaning of the title. Now though, I'm more focused on the characters and their interactions with each other, so I gave the final moments to them to be characters. I think it's a much nicer, more thematic way to end the scene. In the original, this marked the end of the chapter, but not in the remake. Flip the page and you'll be presented with the lore over a 2-page spread. I'm still fine-tuning exactly what I'm presenting over these 2 pages, but I'm taking what I spent 5 pages to do in the original and squishing it into 2. I'm picturing it like a tapestry unfurled across the pages, telling you visually, and with narration of course, about the lore the kingdom is built on. After 11 pages of meeting the characters, I think a quick 2-page lore dump will be earned. I attempt to drop some of this information during those opening 11 pages, but this tells the audience what's going on in no uncertain terms, which I recognize some people will need since I don't want to go the annoying route of character clearly explains the lore to another character who definitely already knows these things. That's my personal exposition pet peeve right there. And there you have it. It's probably going to be a couple more months at least till I get around to actually making these pages, but I'm feeling pretty happy with the choices I've made so far. Again, taking the time to properly study comics has really helped. There are plenty of concepts I knew and internalized just by being a reader of comics and by trying to make my own. Solidifying those concepts by putting them into words has made me way more intentional in using them. I really can't wait to get back to work on the remake, but I have to pace myself. For as much as I've learned, there's also a lot I still need to learn. Particularly, I'm going to shift the focus of my weekly studies away from digging into concepts and start making things. Art things. Because if there's one other area I feel lacking in, it's my art. I've never characterized myself as a bad artist by any means, but I do consider myself a just okay one. And when I want to make a comic like The Chosen One's Mentor that has so many beautiful moments in my head, my current skill level just isn't going to cut it. It hasn't been. Anyone who's read my original comic may have noticed that the style of various elements changed a lot over the course of a year. The backgrounds were inconsistent in quality. I flip-flopped around various shading and rendering methods a lot. Even the thickness of my line art went through some experimental phases. I don't want to do that to the remake. I don't want these obvious style changes to be visible every 5 chapters. So before I touch the remake, I'm going to nail down my style for the comic. That's what the next few weeks will focus on. Style choices, design choices, and filling in the known gaps in my skills until they're at a level where I feel they're ready for the final product. I know a lot of my recent newsletters have been sort of dry essays on comics and storytelling concepts, and I hope that in shifting to talking about art, specifically my own art, that I can bring some fun back to these newsletters. I think I sort of lost the thread on the entertaining side of my educational content, and I intend to correct that. Thanks for sticking around this long. It's been 10 weeks of a lot of learning concepts and getting back into the groove of writing. Let's see what 10 weeks of actively working on my art does. I'm excited, and I hope you are too. With that said, let's talk painting, the other thing I've been improving on in the last 10 weeks. It's time to move on to a new brush this week, and by new, I mean new for everyone, including me. In my research into the various types of brushes painters use, I came across a brush that was advertised as being a great all-around brush for various purposes. A brush that some painters found they used for the vast majority of their work. And upon rifling through my disorganized collection of brushes, I realized I didn't have one, so I bought one. It's called a dagger brush, named so because, well, it kinda looks like a blade. It's got a shape that makes it capable of doing almost anything. You can use the wide, flat side to lay down a thick line of paint. You can rotate it to use the bladed tip to make fine lines, and that curved shape lends itself beautifully to varying up your stroke width. When I saw what it was capable of in videos, I knew I had to get one, so here it is. And here's what my first attempt at using it looked like. As a quick note, I'm getting a lot better at making gradients. It really is just a matter of practicing till you understand it. I mostly made use of the sharp edge of the dagger brush for this painting to get those fine lines, but wow, making beautiful lines with a dagger brush is shockingly easy. You can easily get those elegant strokes that start tapered, get thicker, and taper off again that are just so pleasing to look at. It got a little addicting just dipping my brush in paint and making a stroke. It's why I chose a water composition so I could play with making wavy lines. I definitely had some struggles in areas where I wanted to blend a little more, but couldn't quite get it to work out. I think this is likely an inexperience problem instead of a limitation of the brush. Regardless, I was pretty happy with the result I got in a surprisingly short painting session. I'm excited to tackle this brush for another week and see what I can make next. My painting collection is slowly growing, and I'm already seeing the results of my weekly practice. It's nice. And that's all for this week, gang. Thanks for listening.